Random disclaimer.
I am an NA player, so this means that my perspective is shaped by the NA experience. Depending on your region, my words may not ring true or some problems may even be non-existent. Please keep in mind that in that case, it's not the NA player base's fault, it's just me being stupid.
Stalcraft. Stalcraft is a game. A video game at that. This means that when we play Stalcraft, we are all beholden and constricted by the rules and systems that make up the game. We are all playing the way the devs want the game to be played, or at least within the boundaries they have set for us. So what happens when said boundaries, rather than feeling fair and like a set of parameters through which you get to have fun, feel like they're instead fucking you over, or like they are working directly against your personal enjoyment of the game? That's when tensions start arising. I know that it's impossible to ask for a perfect video game, and most people never do, but in that same vein, I don't believe anyone would ever willingly wish to play a bad game, which is why, like the live service that it is, Stalcraft is in a constant state of changes and fluctuations. A nerf here, a buff there, a rework everywhere. It's all a step in the direction of what the devs hope will make the game better for the player base they are nurturing. Or at least, that's the assumption that we should all be working under. In that same vein, even if it doesn't feel like it, one should assume still that criticism, wherever it may come, always sprouts from a place of genuine concern for the game and a desire to see it doing well. Even if nobody says it, and even if it doesn't seem like it, we are all on the same team, the Make Stalcraft Good team. I want to make this crystal clear, both to the player base and, if they're watching at all, the developers. When I make this video, I'm not trying to be sly, I'm not trying to be smart, or trying to trap anyone in a logical fallacy or a flawed argument or whatever. I am trying to be funny, but only insofar as it's entertaining. This video is made entirely, top to bottom, 110% out of goodwill, love, and positive intentions. For starters, I'd like to say that throughout this video, I'll try to steer clear from easy reductive statements like a game for everyone is a game for no one. Not because it's lacking in truth, but because I think it's just a cop-out phrase most people use to crown themselves the smartest gamer in the room. In that same vein, it's easy to suggest as many ideas in a single video as you can blink within an hour, with suggestions like, what if we added a fishing minigame, and drivable cars, and grappling hooks, and power-ups, and player-made factions, and a sex minigame. I'm not saying all suggestions fall under this umbrella, but what I do mean is that there's some additions that could be very well thought out, and then there's suggestions that might as well be, hey guys, what if we all start smashing our balls with a hammer? This is why, when I make my suggestions, not only will I try to stick to the idea that it should fix a problem that I personally see in the game, I will stick to the thought that it should not be only beneficial to players, but also sensible for the developers. Because something like giving all players infinite stall coins would be good for us, but it would also mean that Expo would go bankrupt in about a week. Stalcraft isn't a pay-to-win game, it's a pay-to-skip game. But what's the difference, some might say? After all, if you get to skip the grind, you win over the people that are still grinding. No? Case closed. Not entirely wrong, but not the whole picture either. Skipping over the semantics, what I am saying is that paying in Stalcraft doesn't necessarily get you gear that is inherently unreachable and or better, but rather that it helps you avoid the one system that makes up the entire purpose of playing the game in the first place: progression. From doing tasks to progressing the season pass, to clan wars, to operations, everything you do in Stalcraft progresses you towards something. You can do things for the fun of it, but not only is fun subjective, Stalcraft is a grinding game, and grinding is known not to be particularly fun. Engaging maybe, pleasant or relaxing maybe, fun not really. Of course, there are risks associated that have a chance to, if not fun, at least make things interesting. If you've ever felt the exhilaration of winning a PvP encounter with a truckload of valuables in your bag, finding an artifact that propels you to wealth, or finally gathering enough shit for your first master tier gear, then you already know where the true highs of Stalcraft are. In that same vein, getting killed and losing all your loot, artifacts, choosing the wrong piece of gear, getting stumped in a match, opening loot boxes and getting nothing but shit, if you've seen this, in turn, you know how low the bad can get. Made even worse because your time investment just went straight down the fucking drain and will have to be reinvested in order to get back to where you were, if you get the chance to do so ever again, that is. All of this put together leads us to the following fact: time consumption and grinding are Stalcraft's main player enemy. These are the things that you work towards getting over, or if you got the resources, pay to avoid. These are things that, when they become more pervasive in the game, you immediately become enraged, even if you can't name it, because whenever something is made grindier and more time consuming, it actively worsens an aspect of the game which is already supposed to make you wanna give in and cough up your money. In a game where losing means wasting time with nothing to show for it, having it, Stalcraft itself, suddenly demand more of your time for the same shit will, in turn, always feel like you're being forced to lose. And this is where I believe the root of the problem actually is. Not at the fact that FOMO exists at all, but due to the fact that FOMO is directly tied to the game's progression. Not engaging sufficiently with the FOMO system doesn't just mean missing out on something cool. Depending on where a player may or may not stand in the game's progression, failing to meet the season pass quota can mean missing out on an extremely useful piece of gear that would rapidly catapult their progression from mid-game to late game. In this sense, even if at this point the precedent has been set and getting rid of such a system would be like ripping the most painful bandage off of the community's arm, I believe that including gear, or at the very least master level gear, with every season pass, has become one of Stalcraft's most, if not the most pressing issue when it comes to how unbalanced, sometimes speedy, sometimes molasses slow progression is. These 3 points combined, seasonal FOMO, increasingly punishing time gating, literal and in terms of resource gathering, and the ever-present need to lead people towards payment methods, all of these together are the moving parts of a larger, pervasive problem that makes Stalcraft feel unrewarding, slow, frustrating, and almost pointless to play when you get sick enough of it, or even if you've progressed enough through it. Seasonal gear is powerful enough to dramatically accelerate progression. This means that missing a season doesn't just mean missing out on something cool, you're missing the chance to either skip a month-long grind if you're a new player, giving you the chance to build something else in the meantime, or as a late game player, you'll miss out on not having to spend dozens of millions on randomized loot crates when it eventually comes back in the form of schematic parts, which has its own time cost. Plus, let's not kid ourselves, it's telling that whenever a season pass reward is a weapon, suddenly all PvP matches are full of them. These are not bad guns. Progression and FOMO have become part of the same system when, in my opinion, these two things could be entirely separate. Not the way to fix it, but a way to fix it could be a rework of the season pass, one that moves the focus away from straight up gear and towards cosmetics and useful items. The Stalcraft art team has proven time and time again that they can provide cosmetics in a timely manner. From charms to paints, motifs and styles, their work is nothing short of superb. I've yet to see a single style or motif I wouldn't love to have. Would it be too tall of an ask to have, say, a style and a motif per season pass, one for getting to level 1000, the other attained somewhere within the first 500 levels? Not that weapons should be entirely removed from the season pass. In this ideal utopia of a situation that I've envisioned, there would be a new trader, the seasonal trader. Participation in a current event and the completion of daily tasks would gain you currency, not unlike how things are already, but said currency would instead be needed in the hundreds of thousands or maybe millions in order to purchase seasonal gear off of him. I'll put it in simpler terms. In my new system, by the time you reach level 500 on the battle pass, you'd have, say, 100,000 season credits. You then get a time-limited 50% discount coupon with which to buy the new season's piece of gear for exactly 50,000 season credits, or you could buy a piece of gear from a past season for 100,000. I'm not too sure on the numbers, but for the sake of making an example, I think you get the idea. Think of it like act tickets, except unlike act tickets, they'd be renewable and stackable throughout seasons maybe. That way, even if you missed out on a previous season, or if you don't have the time to continuously reach level 500, you could still eventually grind enough for a piece of gear that you really want. Grinding would remain important, and playing Stalcraft in a timely manner would be beneficial, but missing out wouldn't mean a complete loss either. There's things that I definitely wouldn't change about progression. It's an MMO. I played MMOs for a decent chunk of my life. I like grinding. The highs of coming back with a large haul, and the almost crisis-inducing lows of having a whole hour of progress stripped away. These are things that make Stalcraft Stalcraft, and I wouldn't change them. But progress, not cosmetics or profile decor or season currency or consumables. Progress should be rewarded by dedication, not by timeliness. We already have academic studies and work sites that demand that of us. Not to brag, but take a look at me and the characters that I have. I have a single main character, which is the one I usually play the most, and a bunch of other ults, which are mainly so I can get multiple perspectives on lore shit and record B-roll footage. This doesn't mean that I don't gear them up, mind you, I do, mainly through purchasable gear, schematic part weapons, and during the Tempered Steel season, I actually went ahead and decided to develop a second virginity by way of getting to level 500 on all of my characters. Look at all the shit that I have in my Covenant ult, my Rise ult, my Frontier ult, and my Mercenary ult, and lastly, but mostly, my main character. What does this mean? This means that late game players, like me, are placed in a position where gear acquisition is not only fast, but it's extremely easy and extremely convenient. It's not like the money is infinite, but for the most part, we don't really engage with the game as much as someone still progressing. Selling suits, buying suits, selling spare parts, and buying spare tools, we're all part of the same in-game market of player-produced progression skips, and I believe Expo is trying to, maybe not eliminate this, but definitely make it less feasible. Now, I'd like to point you towards 3 specific instances that I believe make my perspective understandable. First, the Chaitak intervention releases, and while it's possible to use trade tokens to buy it, I'll make the bold assumption that most people utilized rubles. Unlocking it with rubles costed about 150 million, and while I don't believe everyone spent that much, it's still a decent chunk of change to take from a single person, let alone an entire community. Mind you, this is a money sink that didn't stay in the auction house or get traded around. This was a straight up money disappearance. Rubles being dropped into a volcano to never be seen again. Kind of like those system auctions. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, many MMOs do this in order to avoid hyperinflation. Oh good, this was only 3 months ago, mind you. Enough time to recover around 100 million? Maybe, but only if you've got 2 things. People generating money to flow into the auction house economy by way of quests, loot sales and activities, and the way to, by trade, take said people's money. This usually comes in the form of gear, artifact sales, or more importantly, season pass items. I know I talked about it like I was discovering some new badass thing in my how to make money video, but I'd wager to bet a lot of you watching already did this as one of your main money making schemes, selling tradable items bought with season currency. So what happens next? Second, the prices skyrocket. So hard it almost seems funny. A single tradable spare part was 800, now it's more than twice that. Equipment crates, operation amenities, even components are suddenly more than 1000. What's so funny about this, you might ask? Third, along with all of this, Arsen was adjusted to only receive limited numbers of items in order to gain reputation. But this doesn't include advanced spare parts or tools. Yes indeed, one of the main exports sold in the auction house for large amounts of rubles and that can be bought from the store with either season currency at inflated rates or with stall coins at a price that even I will admit is a bit too much, is completely exempt from the limits of the average mortal. They literally showed you a time gate and sold you the key. Some might say that money sink moves in Stalcraft are done to avoid overinflation and to keep things in the auction house from becoming too inaccessible. But when prices for season currency items skyrocketed, advanced spare parts going from 40 to 50k all the way to 80k a piece, I'd say it was more of a move to make the Stalcraft ruble more inherently valuable. And since it's more inherently valuable, people might be more inherently willing to buy items with stall coins in order to garner large amounts of money. I'm not saying this is not understandable. From a monetization standpoint, it makes perfect sense. But I do believe that, by upping the prices on everything, Expo did go ahead and show their whole hand in an untimely manner. The people who these changes affect the most aren't the established players sitting on their money. It affects newer players who are trying to enter the game's economy. After all, in-game rewards get nerfed, player-made skips sold through the auction house become more expensive, and the only way to work your way through this is through dedicated playing or straight up paying. I'm not asking for progression to be made faster. Shit, it could be made slower and harder if that's what's necessary. What I am asking is for it to make sense, for it to feel worthwhile, and for it to be tailored around the experience of a first-time player. Because as it stands, progression is not being made longer by way of adding new quests, new systems, new steps in the process. It's being lengthened by way of making playing the game less rewarding in a time to gameplay ratio. Because as it stands, there's a good chance that there's a decent chunk of players that hopped on and left because all they could do and knew about Stalcraft was grinding, killing piggies, and getting shot in the head by a player who was abusing the tier system. Stalcraft as a game is fun, the PvPvE aspect of it, the high stakes of every expedition, but when so many systems seem to be changing to stifle growth, either with time gates, nerfed loot, increasing prices, so much so that it almost seems like a parody, and updating the game in unpredictable ways that destroy the logic behind certain purchases, you can't really blame a newbie for leaving. Not not for that, and certainly not after realizing that he doesn't want to spend 20 hours grinding purples so he can then earn the right to either farm for 100 hours for a single red or playing on a semi-daily basis for 2 to 3 months for the season pass reward. The zone being evergreen. For this one, I'm going to use an example. I'll make it real simple, so even if you're not the biggest MMO buff, you should still get the gist of what I'm trying to say. Let's say that Final Fantasy XIV releases a new expansion called Sexy Babes, the expansion. When a new Final Fantasy expansion releases, it adds new systems, new jobs, new raids and dungeons, and of course, the best part of it all, the new map to explore and get immersed in. Not to mention the music, which, if you're a fan of set pieces rather than ambiental tracks, you should really check out. In comparison, let's say that World of Warcraft also releases an expansion, this one being called Zombie Babes, the expansion. Unlike Final Fantasy XIV, in World of Warcraft, the moment that a new expansion releases, all prior ones become immediately irrelevant. They can be grinded for cosmetics, sure, there's achievements, and sometimes there's events and weekly raids that bring you back to older content, but their rewards are seldom ever worth your time, and for the most part, all the other areas become mostly abandoned in favor of the current, new, fresh and exciting world that will surely become abandoned as soon as the next expansion releases. While Stalcraft doesn't follow the same expansion model as these games, new seasons don't exactly come with new maps, mechanics, raids, dungeons and storylines each and every single time a new one releases, but if I had to make a comparison, I'd say that Stalcraft is closer to World of Warcraft than Final Fantasy XIV, and that's a problem. It's not like the world is growing in giant steps with every new season, yet after a certain point in progression, there's little excuse to remain in the Southern Zone. A massive chunk of the game is discarded even though Stalcraft isn't that type of a treadmill MMO. The Southern Zone is prepped for content obsolescence in a game where content obsolescence shouldn't even fucking exist. Plus, let's not act like another selling point that Stalcraft tries to sell you on is the setting, but the further we progress, the game concentrates into fewer locations, the Southern Zone becoming a hallway that old players know and new players are told to sprint through as fast as possible in order to get to the real game, quote unquote. I believe that the lack of major, relevant late game content in the South is actually a massive opportunity for content that remains interesting throughout an account's lifetime. The appearance of relay stations was a step in the right direction if you ask me, but I think we can do better. Expo already proved they got the technical capacity to create special conditions in open world maps during this year's Inside Out event. How about scaling that down and dropping some similar things throughout the South? Something like military invasions in the South that make roaming SSPP forces appear, killing them dropping PDAs and crockeries. Or something like a swamp anomalous bloom, a side effect of the murmur invasion. Every now and then the entire swamp gets foggy and anomalous, even traversing becomes treacherous. World events are always fun. How about a world event in which players can defend Polskoye or Path of Fools from waves of wandering zombies, participation being rewarded with resources, cash and experience. It doesn't even have to be cool and edgy. Drop a giant piggy in the bar, call him the Tsar Piggy, and to defeat the Tsar Piggy and his revolution of hogs, you must go around killing all the wandering pigs in the bar. The Southern Zone doesn't exist to be abandoned. I know Xbox knows this. In a game like Stalcraft, the zone shouldn't feel like a ladder you climb and then you're done. Finito. It should feel like a place with shit going on always, because that's what the setting is trying to imply whenever the lore tells us that, off camera, Civcas have established their base in Forge, Murmur are kidnapping stalkers who are downed, and all of these factions are always engaged in some sort of war of influences over the north that isn't just fighting over checkpoints day in and day out. Progression. Co-op grinding. This one's near the end because, comparatively speaking, I don't have too much to say that's important or as well thought out as my prior points. That along with the fact that Stalcraft isn't really marketed as a co-op game, which is a huge shame since with the squad feature, one might think the game would emphasize the experience of banding together as you go on these long, dangerous looting treks, doing events together, and being rewarded as comrades. Instead, the most I've ever used this feature for such a context was back in the day when me and my friend had to toss a coin over who got to do the next event, or being added to squads while solo grinding so we don't mess each other up. Loot from events is already nothing too impressive for the most part, which means that sharing it only diminishes your reward, which heavily discourages tackling tasks together. I'm only getting like 1,000 rubles worth of items and red ferns. Do you think I wanna share what little I get with other players? That's why I think the game would benefit from some sort of a system which rewards players in the same squad at a set amount, even if they do lesser work. Of course, the immediate thought that may come to mind is the idea that this would give rise rise to AFK farmers, dudes who go around accompanied by their high-level buddies who do everything for them, helping them blast through progression without ever lifting a finger except to press W towards the next relevant place. And what I'm proposing is something along those lines, even if not quite. I'm not entirely sure how the world event drops work, but I'm going to assume it's some sort of a point-based system, with the amounts of damage you've dealt being your budget for the type of resources that can drop for you. In this new system I'm proposing, depending on participation, all squad members would be rewarded a certain amount. The player who dealt the most damage would get the full reward, even if sharing the event. The players that dealt at least 50% of that damage would then get, say, a full reward of their own, about 75% of a full event reward. And if you deal less than 50% of the damage dealt by the top player, you get 25% of a reward. You would still have to participate, you can't just sit on your ass and do nothing, but now participating in events together isn't as directly bothersome. I'm not too keen on the numbers, but if tweaked correctly, I believe this could make things like grinding squads and people helping lower levels not just possible, but actually healthy for the game. Grinding by itself is rarely ever something fun. The interactions you have with other people as you grind are where the real memories are made, and in a game where the social experience and meeting other players is a major part of its draw, I think bringing friends along should be encouraged, not punished. Ending. To end things off, I think it's best that I make it clear why I care this much. Here's the thing. I am not nonchalant. I am not unbothered or cool or calm and collected. I am passionate. I am a spurg about things I like. I love passionately, and when I really like something, I throw myself feet, dick, balls and head, my whole self goes in. The only thing keeping me from going on shit-flinging rants is the fact that there's a script writing process and about 10 hours of editing between me thinking something and it coming out as a video, so I have that privilege. But at the same time, I'm not so hopelessly sweet, gentle and saccharine as to not look at the follow-up of updates that have come out and not see a clear pattern of continuous road blocking, not just in currency, but in systems and gameplay. Not everything is doom and gloom, mind you. The Wild North released when, according to the devs, it was a very unlikely thing to ever happen in the first place. Some of you might have disliked it, but the adjustments to medicines that made suit categories more important was actually, to me, a really cool addition. In that same vein, I thought the fusing of northern maps was one of the best things that could have happened to low-density servers. The Sea of Exclusion operation, in my opinion, is the first of what I hope are many entertaining high-quality operations which actually have fun and engaging mechanics, even if I think Stalcraft doesn't really make sense as a horde shooter. Whenever some new lore, some new motifs or styles, or even tiny little things like the Tame in June quest or even the Tamagotchi charm comes out, I seldom ever think it's not cool. I don't want you to leave this video thinking, oh, this fucking guy, he fucking hates Expo, because I really don't. If I did, I wouldn't be here. But at this point, clearly, we are building up to something. With constant nerfs to progression and currency adjustments that show no sign of stopping, it would seem to me that at some point, at some moment, Stalcraft simply strayed too far from what Expo wants it to be into the game that it is. If I had to venture a guess, I believe that this is all some sort of a push to make Stalcraft a bit more similar to games like War Thunder or Mir Tankov, telling you to look at the grind ahead of you, neuter any sort of player-made skip through the control of sale, trade and purchase of season items, so that the purchase of stock coins and the variety of useful and cool things you can buy becomes more alluring and to a point make more sense. And you might look at this and call Expo Satan incarnate, but even if discouraging, this isn't exactly surprising or even weird. Stalcraft's content, relatively speaking, has always been quickly accessible to any player in the right set of conditions, so encouraging the purchase of in-game tokens that can then be cashed out into in-game currency that can then be turned into grind-skipping content is the most baseline of monetization schemes. Just be glad there isn't a mechanic where upgrading your gun has a chance of permanently breaking it. Those of you who have played Asian MMOs will know what I'm talking about. Do I believe we'll see any rollbacks? No, which is the most frustrating part about this if you ask me, because sometimes it feels as though changes that quote-unquote listen to the community are the ones that are easy fixes. But when it comes to these large, sweeping things that inherently change the dynamic of gameplay, not making them better or more engaging or deeper, just making them more of a hassle, we just get the chance to duke it out in the chat rooms and the forums, you know? Let the community work off some steam, you right? We'll be back. Now, let's say that everything I say doesn't mean anything. Either I missed the mark entirely, or my suggestions are unrealistic, and the things that bother me or the way that I said it are simply the way things are supposed to be. Even if this video won't be seen by anyone from Expo, I believe that it is still a good thing for videos like this to come out, because you know what? At least that means that the community has some sort of a chance, some sort of a space to speak out about what they like and don't like, and at least it'll be something that's more easily found than comments on the forum, Reddit or Discord. Who knows, maybe not this time, but maybe next time there will be some sort of a precedent for what rattles the community. In that same vein, I would like to invite you, my dear viewer, to leave your opinion in the comments, not just relating to this, but to Stalcraft as a whole. Even if it's something small like I don't like the HUD, or even something positive like I really like the Blue Sphere storyline, which I know I did, because even if, truly, I want my channel to be a variety channel, I do want you guys to feel empowered to speak and feel as though this is a healthy, constructive space for the community to express itself. Now, for my concluding statement, I don't want Stalcraft to be made easier, I want Stalcraft to feel rewarding. For there to always be chances to be entertained and have fun, in the style that this genre interprets fun, of course, while progressing in a way that makes my time feel meaningful and honored. I don't make videos like this because I hate Stalcraft or Expo. I don't know what they might think of me, but I like them both. And if I say these things, it's because next year, and the year after that, I want the game to grow and the community to become more pervasive. I love the setting, and I love the gameplay. But as it stands, Stalcraft's progression is being artificially lengthened and without the proper systems of engagement with which to make the player feel like the experience is still worthwhile. Because, mind you, the game already was grindy. And if you think that me saying all of this is too much of a stretch, I'll just put it like this: it's getting boring.